There's a lot you can learn from Out of the Past.
Welcome to Martin County Historical Society's Out of the Past. My name is Lenny and this is Jim. Today we're going to see a really interesting interview about the Draper Foods and Draper Beverages with the Draper brothers. Jim, Steve, and Chuck. But first, before we do that, Jim, what'd you bring?
Well, appliances around the household have evolved over the years, and today I thought we'd take a little bit of a look back. This here is your hand vac. Well, not yours, but what you would use. This is a Singer. I'm not entirely sure what year, but it's a hand vac. You put your little hose or your bag on there and bop around the house.
Looks like you just recycled the dust on you.
Yeah, it's kind of got the exhaust port here, yeah. Also, I have got this 1920s electric toaster. And you don't get the very satisfying pop-up of the toast, but it does have this sort of fold-down feature here where you put your bread in. So
what do you do? Only toast one side?
well, I think you probably put them in and fold it up and let it go for a while. And I don't know, I haven't dared plug it in to use it because I don't think it might be a little bit of a shocking experience if you get my drift. So
Truth be told, I remember one of those.
Oh, really?
Back on the farm when I was pretty young.
sure.
Yeah, you put the toast in, or the bread in, you toast it, watch it, open it up, flip it around, do it again.
Sure.
And hope for the best.
Well, I'm glad that they've developed the pop-up feature.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay, those are really interesting.
yeah. So that's what we've got today. Should we take a look at that interview?
Let's take a look at the interview. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Awesome.
We're here at the Pioneer Museum, and today we're going to visit with the Drapers, Steve, Chuck, and Jim, about the business that the Drapers had that had a really positive impact economically on Martin County and actually the whole southern Minnesota area. So first of all, I'd like each of you to introduce yourself briefly, tell a little bit about your role in the business and what you're doing right now, and we'll start with Steve.
It's a pleasure to be here, first of all. I really like what Mr. Tweeton's been doing with the history of Martin County. My name is Steve. I am the middle child of George and Faye. Started in the food business in 1952. I was born in 1955, and from there I kind of started by picking up cardboard in between the candy aisles for Granddad Earl, and
Didn't pick up any candy though, did you?
I stuffed my pockets full of candy. There was always half boxes around, and I got caught many times on that. But anyway, I grew up in the business as a salesman. I was the first one to hit $1 million in sales, and my brother and me, Mike, were constantly battling back and forth to see who could sell the most stuff. But anyway, I was the first one to hit $1 million in sales annually, and he was not far behind. He focused on schools, and I focused on general trade, restaurants, hospitals, and clubs and stuff like that. So for many years I was a salesman up and down the road. I went in to replace a very valuable employee named Lyle Munson, who was general manager, and that's when I began my purchasing career. And so I did a lot of the purchasing for Drapers. On the food side, fresh meat. I had help, with a couple categories, but basically I was purchasing for probably a good part of 10 years anyway, and before we had sold out to another company. And my current age is 68 years old. I have a beautiful family. I live here in Fairmont with my wife, Janine, and my kids both live in Minneapolis, Maple Grove, and Maconia, and they have started their own families. So I guess that's basically me. So
Are you retired then?
I'm retired about a year and a half now.
Okay.
66 is when I retired. So
Okay. Chuck, how about you?
I grew up in the family business too, and born in '52. Grew up around the supper table here, and Dad talked about what had gone on with their whole thing all day, and did some delivery, did some sales. Came back full time in '78 when the two brothers split. They split the food and the beverage side split, and I came in on the office side of the beverage business and started in purchasing, office management, became general manager of the beverage side. I was a middle child also, older sister Cheryl, younger brother James, and just, Grandpa Earl had a great idea back in 34. He first started Fairmont Wholesale. Then he came back with 48, I think, to start Earl Draper and Sons, Candy Tobacco, and Schmidt Beer was their first beer, I think. City
That's
Club.
the only thing they had.
Yeah, and anyway, so thanks for having us today. It's
Oh,
a pleasure to be here and an honor to be interviewed like this. So.
Okay. Jim?
I'm Jim. I'm the youngest of the family, and I started, like Kegger, Steve, sweeping floors and that kind of thing. And then I went to college for a few years, and then came back full time in '79, a year after Chuck. And we it was a long story with Grandpa starting Fairmont Wholesale, and we mentioned that, and then we got into a couple different buildings, and the business continued to grow. We had, like he said, we started with Schmidt Beer, and then we got Pabst the same year, and then my mom and dad got married, and it was 1948.
where did the stores label come into? Was
That
one of
was
the first ones?
probably in about the 60s. Yeah, that came.
They still make that?
No.
It was down in Nebraska, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
Cape Girardeau.
Omaha?
Yeah, it was a white bottle, kind of like Miller, and it was really a hit at first, and it didn't last too long. And like the Schmidt was a local beer from St. Paul, and Pabst was a national brand, and it kept growing. And then they picked up Schlitz beer and many more after that. And so anyway, it was a good growing up, and my dad was very successful, and George. And Lyle, he mentioned, they just knew what they were doing, and
Sure.
timing was right, and I could ramble forever. But really, when we started selling a lot of beer, Schlitz was like #1 in the country, and we just, kind of before my time. I just remember it was everywhere, and then that kind of fizzled out, and not because of us, because of the brewery, and then they made some changes, but then the Pabst took off real heavily, and then the drinking age changed in '74, I think. I think it was the year before.
Up to 18?
Yeah, to 18, and we had the hot brand Blue Ribbon, and it just took off, and the kids were having fun, and they weren't on the gravel roads anymore. They were in these establishments.
Sure.
That was the drinking age limit lowered, so we didn't have to hide it, So.
Yeah, they didn't have to get it from us anymore. Our friends, no, I'm kidding. But that changed a lot. But anyway, so like I said, it was a good run, and it was a good partner with my brother, and then the Draper Foods were, they were still kind of like partners with us. They helped us out, we helped them out. So
Okay, Earl Draper was your grandfather, and he was the founder of Draper Foods. What brought him to Fairmont? Or what do you think brought him to Fairmont?
I think it was the lakes. He was on the road with Nash Finch, traveling salesman all over the Midwest.
What was Nash Finch?
They sold to Gunther's,
Grocery wholesaler.
Grocery wholesaler, okay.
And he was on the road with them, and I'm sure he liked the lakes at Fairmont. I don't think he had any other connection to town. He was a big Mason, and I'm sure they had a pretty clan here.
They did, yeah.
And so it was a big thing for him too, I think.
he had a partner too that he met in Fairmont.
Here in town?
Yeah.
Okay. And then from there,
He sold out of that, and Dad was working for a company in Omaha, a paper company, yeah. That'd be Chuck Sr. And I can't remember what year it was. He had sold out Fairmont Wholesale and thought he was retired as a young man.
That was Earl.
Yeah, Earl.
Okay.
At
And then
55, I think. I think it was at 55.
He was age 55.
Yeah.
Sometime in the 40s.
Sure.
And then our grandmother, Doris, called Dad down there and said, "You got to come back. Your dad's going crazy here. He's got to have something to do.
Got something to do, yeah.
He wants to go back into business." So then Dad and Earl went into business in 48, was it?
Yeah.
And which one was that then? Was that Fairmont Wholesale?
In 1934 it was Fairmont Wholesale, and then
Okay.
in 48 it became Earl Draper and Sons.
Earl Draper and Sons. And was that did not include the beverage part then?
It did at that point, yes.
It did.
In 48 it did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the next phase and the next step? Was it
Business got so big that we were stumbling over each other in the one warehouse on State Street, and trucks outside, just nowhere to go. And after several expansions of that warehouse, I believe it was 7 expansions that I can remember, getting bigger and bigger and growing out, we just Chuck and George decided that it'd be better off if we split it into 2 different divisions. And we moved out to a building about 4 blocks east of the Ranch restaurant on Winnebago Avenue. And
was that the food portion?
that was the food portion.
Okay.
And at that point, we just kept growing into more products offered. So,
Can I interject there?
yes.
Part of what happened with this growth thing was George and Dad got connected with NIFTA, which is a national organization of wholesale.
Okay.
And they flew down to Atlanta, I think, to check it out. And it was a huge thing for the company. And Dad didn't want to get into it. George did.
Yeah.
And these guys, partners argue all the time. But George got heavy. At that point, it was like heavy food and heavy beverage. I mean, it was like almost 2 different companies from that point on, I think. Don't you think?
Yep. And I believe the organization NIFTA, National Institutional Food Distributor Associates of America, I believe that really set the pace for Draper Foods
Absolutely.
growth and the products that we offered, because it was amazing. It was some of the top distributors in the United States, and we'd all get together and we'd have the purchasing power necessary to compete. And we went all over the America food shows, Washington, D.C., New York, Toronto, Boston, Florida. And I got to go along on just about every other one, because me and my brother shared. Someone had to stay home and sweep the floors. So. But we toured some really neat, or visited some very nice cities, and we did purchasing type thing where we'd go around and we'd talk to the manufacturers and secure some bargains and stuff like that. So.
Then the beverage side,
We built
how did that evolve then?
Actually, George built the building that's up by, it's Happy Seeds now.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And George and I think Pal Eisner, they built the building to see if it's going to work for both brothers. And so it was kind of a trial, really. But we knew it was going to work because they were growing so much and we were growing. And then George Chuck, our dad, ended up buying out Pal. And then it was just George and Chuck. And then he bought, when they did the real split, this was kind of a temporary deal. Then they did split, and everything was split. George took the semis and blah 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 and whatever. You probably know more about that. And
Probably, was it 1981 or 1983?
83.
That's when we moved out to the warehouse on Winnebago Avenue.
Yeah, and we moved into the new warehouse behind the Legion.
Yeah.
So,
I think an interesting part of the story is that, Earl, with his 2 sons, set this thing up and had a great idea. It was boom, post-war America, things were booming.
Sure.
And then each of the sons had 2 sons. We lost Mike, your brother.
what year was that, Steve?
That was in 2000 and, let's see, 2008.
Yeah.
In August, he was in a tragic car accident south of Fairmont. And
55
he
years
didn't
old.
Took the
survive.
wind out,
So.
took the wind out of everybody's sails.
Yeah, that was tough.
Terrible deal.
But we moved on, and he.
Yeah.
How many did each side employ? How many employees did you have?
We got
Roughly
We had roughly 15 on the beverage side.
50?
15.
15.
And we peaked out at 55, and that wasn't including several part-timers that worked at the famous Party and Pantry store.
Tell me about the Party and Pantry store.
Tell you about it. Wow. This originally was scheduled that we got rid of our damaged goods there from all the forklifts running into stuff out to the warehouse, and we added refrigeration equipment there. We sold things like cinnamon rolls that we were famous for, chicken strips, and
Potato salad.
potato salad from Mrs. Jerry's over in Albert Lee.
That's great.
That business was, I believe, very important to the churches and general people of Fairmont area.
Now,
And I was-
it wouldn't have to be just a big organization.
No, you could
I could have
buy
walked in there and bought things.
you could buy just a package of paper plates when you walk in there, or a can of green beans, or
Dented cans.
Did you ever get heat from
Yeah,
retailers
there's-
about? Did you ever get heat from retailers about that? Anybody complain about you?
no, because we didn't tell them about it.
They all knew about it.
Now they find out.
Anyway,
Yeah.
after the sale to Hawkeye Foods, things were still going well at the Party and Pantry, and they basically screwed it up. You know, they took a profiting business that was super valuable to the city of Fairmont, and they weren't making any money anymore, so they closed it up. And sadness rolled in, you know, because where's a person supposed to buy that stuff at?
Yeah.
That's right.
Now you find some of the grocery chains, the Hy-Vees and the Walmarts, and they're adding larger institutional type food, you know, for larger group feeding, but still it's not the same. So, but
Can you think of any kind of interesting, unique, or humorous things that took place during the course of your careers on either side, the beverage or the food side?
Well, getting back to that Party and Pantry, I had, older ladies, come up to me and say, and we weren't even part of it anymore. And they said, "Why'd you close that store down? We've been buying stuff for years." And I says, "Well, I didn't close it, and that's the different division, but I did buy stuff there, and it was kind of convenient." But, and then, is it my turn?
yeah, it's still your turn.
Okay. So then
Quarter
we,
hasn't run out yet.
yeah, we got to get going. Anyway, so then our business was going great and everything else, but then, the market was kind of shrinking in Fairmont and the county and everything else, and so sales were slipping a little bit. And then Chuck and I and my dad, we flew to Golden, Colorado to get the Coors franchise. And then my dad always told this story. He says, "I've never been on the road where somebody didn't ask me about when's Coors coming, when's Coors coming." And so we went out there, did an interview, and it was a snowstorm. We're sitting out in front of this beautiful building, and we finally got in. We met our competitors coming out when we went in, and so we were fortunate to get the franchise, and that's when it really took off. We're going to stay in the business. Our other brands were kind of getting soft, and it's just really, if we wouldn't have got the Coors, we probably would have been out of business.
Speaking of the beverage business, I can remember when things were so good that we had 4 semis within the company. I was one of the fill-in drivers. I believe I was only 17 or 18 years old, but
I rode to Milwaukee with you once.
yeah,
That was fun.
yeah, we'd have a competition on leaving Fairmont at Friday after work, and who could get back to the bar on Saturday night by closing time. And at that time, it was my place or
Blazer.
Blazer.
the Blazer. Yeah,
What was the geographic area that you served in?
Well, we were limited because we had territories,
Uh-huh.
but they could go wherever they want. But we had basically 6 counties, I believe, and then we got picked up Albert Lee, which was another county.
Now that's a beverage side?
The
That's
beverage
the beverage
side,
side. Yeah,
Six
because
counties.
that's when we were still all together, But
Jackson County, Cottonwood County, part of Blue Earth County, Martin, of course, Faribault.
often we'd get a whole load of old Milwaukee 12 packs, because that was a hot seller, and then of course there's keg beer and stuff like that. But it was strictly beer coming out of Milwaukee, and then we had picked up an agreement or partnership with Mal and Egg Company here in Fairmont, and we hauled eggs to Chicago and
That's going back a ways.
beer back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember loading eggs.
Held eggs out, beer back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Went to Chicago with the eggs, right?
Yeah,
And then came back
down
through
to the-
Milwaukee for a backhaul of beer.
Yeah,
Interesting.
And it was,
got to be full both ways.
Yeah.
Earl would say,
Yeah.
got to
That's
be
right.
full both ways.
and that started the retirement plan, right?
Retirement plan
Yeah, for the employees
could be.
from that egg run. You know.
Yeah, could be.
I remember that. So I remember loading them up too.
I was just a kid when they stuck me down in the, and it didn't have the best smell either, you know. Fresh eggs coming out of the washing line, and yeah, we used to sweat a lot loading eggs. So
Speaking of low,
Who did you deliver to, or who did you serve on the food side? What,
on the
what
food
kind of
side, it
business
was
is there?
anyone that had a checkbook, but mostly it was institutional schools, colleges, hospitals, Metrodome.
Metrodome?
We had a contract with the Metrodome on Hormel hot dogs. Was one of the things we sold.
I thought
Yeah,
ice
like-
cream too.
huh?
Ice cream I thought was a big.
Oh yeah.
did
yeah.
you get further west than Sioux Falls? How big a coverage did you have?
Well, as Drapers, we never really got more than to the Twin Cities to the north, and about 75 miles each way of Fairmont.
Okay.
You know.
Oh, the
back-
Sioux Falls came after Hawkeye.
Yes.
Oh, I
yes, they had. Well, we did 5 states for the 5 years that I was with Hawkeye. You know, after the purchase, they had salesmen all over the place. And
And when was the Hawkeye purchase?
1999, October the 1.
Okay.
And then I worked for them till 2004. And they asked me to leave Fairmont and come down to Iowa and maintain my current role in purchasing. And I said, that ain't going to work. So I ended up quitting after 5 years. So, but
And on the beverage side, you delivered beer, but did you also have soft drinks and hard
Some.
liquor and stuff too? or-
We had no hard liquor, but we did have wine, beer, wine,
wine.
and water. We started several water. We had Glenwood water and Candy Ohio water.
And who'd you service then? With bars and restaurants?
Well, offices to with water was offices, but yeah, restaurants.
Our biggest things was liquor stores.
Liquor stores.
Fairmont liquor store was like I think 15% of our business at one store, and then we did
Arthur Betts.
yeah, and then we did
Great
all
manager.
the municipals, and then all the bars,
Okay.
and we spent more time in the bars than the liquor stores, and the liquor stores were all where the 90% of our business was, but it was just that's just the way it was,
Sure.
you know.
Coming back from the dry, they were dry counties, right? I mean, like Cottonwood County was dry, and the only place you could get a drink was at the municipal liquor stores.
And
That
VFWs
prohibition.
and
Yeah.
Legions. In fact, the Legion and VFW, they didn't even sell beer, just liquor. They wanted the taverns to have the beer business, and it was, the bar business was pretty big. People would just they'd sit in the bars, and then they'd take a 6-pack home. Well, now they go to the liquor store and they take 5 cases home. Sure. But
So when did the end come for both sides? When did they get sold?
well, Kegger said
99.
99.
99?
99,
For food.
we sold
And they went
out
to
to
Hawkeye.
a much larger company. They were in the top 5 in the United States, Hawkeye Food Systems. They had, at that time, they had facilities in South Chicago, Iowa City, Coralville. Fairmont was their newest affiliation, and there was one other one. I think they had like three distribution centers when we were up and running smooth, and we did an awful lot of transferring in between warehouses, trucks coming and going. But they adopted the ways of Draper Foods for a long time, kept all the employees. It was running pretty good. And then they dropped the party and pantry store. They say because of profitability, but so that was one of the things that I saw them making an error in. But other than that, let's see. I left in 2004, and I believe that they sold out to U.S. Food Service in maybe 2008, something like that. It wasn't that long after they had acquired us, and U.S. Food Systems became, which is now Cisco, the biggest in the world. So they still operate as U.S. Foods and Cisco, but
And Reinhardt.
and Reinhardt now.
Do they have a presence here in Fairmont at all anymore?
None. No, the warehouse was closed, and we maintained the warehouse out there with the help of one of our employees, Ken Gorant.
Kept
He
stuff in.
checked temperatures and kept the freezer going and stuff like that, just in case,
Sure.
So
And the beverage side was sold in when?
2001, I think.
Yeah.
9/11. Remember that?
Okay.
We sold out in March.
it says in the book it says 2000, but
Yeah.
they said 9/1,
Yeah.
9/11.
It's only off a year.
Yeah,
And what our trends were at the time. It's funny how the beer business has changed in the last 20 years, because at the time the national brands of Bud and Miller were just dominating and just steamrolling the whole industry, and we didn't have Bud or Miller. A lot has gone down in the last 20 years in the beer business and the craft beers and
Sure.
things we do. But at the time, it looked like a really good time to get out because, like I say, we didn't have Bud or Miller, and
And we didn't have growth. Mon
Yeah.
County was,
population.
every county
Yeah.
we had was dropping, and
Sure.
so every little bit hurt. So
These other guys came down from Locker Brothers, had Miller,
it
and,
bought us out.
and they were going to the same bars, same restaurants, servicing everybody we served with practically no extra expense. So the thing was kind of worth more to them than it was to us at the time.
Sure.
And it was a good move.
Sure. Well, thank you guys for coming in for the interview. Appreciate it very much. It's a good history to have recorded from
Thank
Martin
you.
County.
Thanks for
And-
having us.
Is there anything we missed or anything you want to add in?
Probably a lot. But
Oh, we got time.
Trying to think of the humor. There was all kinds of humor all the time, but none comes to me right now. I guess.
Well, you were the youngest. Now, I was
was
too.
young.
And did they ever call you the baby of the family then?
oh yeah, Whatever Jimmy wants.
let's let Jimmy do
gets.
it.
But
I remember the food shows that we had here in town. It was a tasting type show.
that's
It
a
was
Legion.
originally
Yeah.
it was originally scheduled for customers of Drapers, and it ended up being everyone is a customer.
Customer,
So
sure.
we went through a lot of food sampling, and we started at the VFW in Fairmont, and that wasn't big enough. And the American Legion, we shut down the power there several times, with all the French fryers and stuff like that. But I also remember the old Armor Foods plant here in Fairmont. They used to buy train loads of sliced potatoes for making their entrees.
For the airlines, right?
Yes, yeah. And we did several rail cars. I think even beer was coming in by rail at that time,
A
wasn't
few
it?
times, yeah. I
Few
think when there
times.
was a strike in Milwaukee,
Yeah.
we got the beer down at right on North, and the trucks are still there. And they drop a trailer off there, and we'd go over there and put a forklift in the truck, and then unload it. And it was stacked in there so tight, it was like you had to just pull one 12-pack out, and then it would kind of open up. And it was, but that's the way they wanted to do it.
Yeah. And we used to get paper products out of Fort Howard and Green Bay, Wisconsin. And we do this little thing called summer deliveries to schools, where we'd go out and we'd sell extra toilet paper and paper towels at a reduced price. And we would deliver that in June. And then we'd come back and hit them up again for food in August. So that kept us real busy at Draper Foods. My dad kind of spearheaded that.
I'm unloading rail cars of Fort
Yeah.
Howard.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Out the rail car.
Yeah, that was something else.
That was all
And we got-
manual.
We got the potato products dehydrated for scalloped potatoes, and we got tomato paste for Armor, for making lasagna and things like that. That was just a few of the things that we sold to them. So it was kind of a joint partnership locally, one scratching each other's back, and plus sourcing the stuff. That kind of goes back to the NIFTA days, with us. We had the opportunity to have plenty of source and stuff like that. But
Okay, Earl Draper was the founder, and he was your grandfather. What's the strongest or the most impressive memory you can have of him?
If I'm going to start, I'm going to say that we always used to meet when I was a little kid and going to school on Saturday mornings, and he'd take us across for donut and cocoa or pop at the Western Cafe right across the street from the North State Street warehouse. And he, of course, would find things for me to do, whether it be picking up cardboard or
Sure.
sampling the candy to make sure it was okay for Halloween. And
Dirty job if somebody had to do it. Huh?
but that was something that I remember a lot. And grandfather was a smart individual, but we had Draper brand cigars, rum soaked crooks they called them. I don't remember which company made. You guys remember that?
I remember
About
that.
kind
But anyway, he always had a cigar, and when he passed, it was stomach cancer or something like that caused his death. But he also, him and Doris, my grandmother, they picked me as their grandchild to get their '66 Chrysler, and I had a big brown Chrysler, and it had a tag in the inside by the glove box that said specially made for Doris and Earl Draper.
Oh,
And
really?
so I took
Wow.
that car and
You
Go
wrecked
good
it. You wrecked it.
I wrecked it. Yeah. Well, actually, the guy that I ran into wrecked it. So. But that was
You got good gas mileage in that car too?
great. I was president of VICA in Fairmont High School, which is Vocational Institutional Clubs of America, and I had back in that day the CB thing was big
Oh,
craze.
sure. Yeah.
And so I had a big whip on the back of my car, and my friends and they knew me. Kager, I guess, is my nickname from many years ago. So, but yeah, we had a lot of fun. But I drove their car, and I went to donuts and pop every Saturday morning for many years.
Good memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Doris, of course, she was a very strong-willed person, and I can remember the family going to eat at the sweet shop one time, and the food wasn't quite warm enough.
Uh-oh.
Well, she complained about it. That and the Serling house, the meatballs weren't quite.
Did they throw you out there?
No,
Oh, I'm kidding.
they just whatever Doris said,
Yeah.
they
They fixed?
they fixed.
She's high maintenance.
High maintenance, to say the least. So
my favorite stories with Grandpa Earl were I loved talking politics with him. He's a bright guy. He graduated in University of Iowa like in 1917. 15 when a lot of guys weren't even going to high school back
Yeah.
then.
yeah.
So he was a college grad, son of an immigrant, and he grew up in Iowa, and just so much respect for the guy. I loved talking politics with him, and I loved every time I could tell he'd been visiting our house because the place smelled like cigars after he'd been there. And
What was the name of that restaurant in Iowa City that they always used to meet at
You got me.
downtown?
I have no idea. What you got, brother?
I was going to mention the 1915 when he graduated too, and I just think back on how long ago that was.
Yeah.
And he was a real gentleman. I mean, soft spoken, and of course he didn't have time to say much because of Doris.
Don't cross him there.
But she was a wonderful person.
Yeah.
Grandma. They were really nice people, and it was fun to be there.
You moved into their house, didn't you? Or how many of the Draper families lived there before?
James moved into
Yeah.
their house, and it was on 143 Linden.
Your
Yeah.
son.
Yeah, my son.
Overseeing Sisseton Lake there.
Yeah, and the only other house they lived in, they rented, 3-4 doors down towards Albion, and then they moved into Linden. That was the only house they lived in.
But Chuck and George, they had playing their fun and games. They threw one or the other threw them off the roof
When they were
onto the
kids.
front lawn. It wasn't a very big fall though. So
They survived.
yeah,
And I remember Kenny Edwards. They talked about him, and they tied him up to the tree and lit a fire underneath him.
Oh.
These were like 4th grade kids, but we had a lot of stories.
Well, sounds like good memories.
Yes.
Yeah.
well,
Very
one
much.
thing that Earl did that kind of sticks in my memory is he had the trucks painted we called it puke yellow and red, so that you seen one of them trucks coming down the road. Well, there's another Draper truck.
You know who
Yeah,
it was.
and
Yeah. Good
for
marketing.
years we had that.
Good marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lenny, for having us. Really
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
it. Yeah.
Very much.
It's been a pleasure. I like what you're doing for the history of Martin County.
Absolutely.
Well, Lenny, that was a really interesting interview. It was great to learn about their business.
Right, it really was interesting. They had a lot of really good information. They were very well prepared, and I think we learned a lot.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That we did. And I hope you learned a lot at home as well. We do hope that you will join us next time on Martin County Historical Society's Out of the Past.
There's a lot you can learn from Out of the Past.